When I first saw him standing right in the middle of the road, my breath caught, because I realized, he wasn't there by accident. I'd driven this old logging track 1,000 times as a forest ranger, heading to my father's abandoned cabin, and never once had I expected to meet anything more dangerous than a loose tire or a fallen branch. But there he was, a massive grizzly, his shaggy coat illuminated by the late afternoon sun, unmoving, watching me with an intensity that felt impossible. I stopped the engine and sat frozen, the old Land Cruiser's rumble fading into a sudden, eerie stillness. He didn't growl. He didn't charge. He simply stood, four powerful paws planted firmly on the dusty gravel, his dark eyes locked on mine. At first I thought maybe he was wounded, or perhaps he'd smelled fresh food in my cooler and was waiting for me to step out. I eased the door open, heart pounding like a drum, and the screech of metal against dried leaves sounded alarmingly loud. He didn't flinch. Not an inch. Even as I climbed out, every muscle in my body screaming to bolt back inside, he stayed where he was. I took a cautious step forward, a shaky hand reaching for the camera slung around my neck, proof, I told myself, that I'd seen this with my own eyes. But the second I fixed my lens on him, he simply shifted his massive head, and I lowered the camera, breath catching again. It felt as if I'd pointed a rifle at him and he was daring me to pull the trigger. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. I glanced back at the cabin in the distance, old pine logs darkening in the shade, but I couldn't tear my eyes from him. He stood motionless, wind ruffling his fur, oblivious to the insects buzzing around his ears. A sudden flash of memory hit me. As a boy, I'd watched my father track a bear that had raided our hives, and I'd sworn then I'd never let myself feel fear again. Yet here I was, paralyzed by the enormity of this beast. I told myself he was just a wild animal, hungry or curious, and that he'd move on as soon as I made the slightest noise. I exhaled slowly and kicked a pebble down the road, expecting him to lumber off into the trees. But he didn't. The pebble skittered to a stop at his paws, and he tilted his head, almost as if he were amused. For a moment, my mind spun. Did he understand me? Did he know I was here for my father's cabin, to claim the land he'd loved? I whispered under my breath, "Go on, move." My voice cracked like dry wood. The bear inhaled deeply, nostrils flaring, and I thought he might charge. I swallowed. Instead, he exhaled slowly, and the only sound between us was the distant rush of a creek and the soft rustle of leaves. The sun dipped lower, and shadows crept across the road, but he remained, unwavering. I leaned against the hood, legs trembling, and tried to steady my racing heart. This was impossible. No creature in its right mind would stand its ground when a man with a camera and bottled water approached. Yet he stayed. My rational mind fought panic. He must be sick. He must be protecting something. I looked down the road behind me, then at the forest on either side, but saw nothing, no cubs, no kill, no sign of distress. Only that bear, watching, waiting. A bead of sweat trickled down my temple. My father's cabin sat another mile ahead, a place I hadn't set foot in since his funeral. I needed to get there before dark, to claim what remained of his memory. I rubbed my eyes, grip tightening on my camera strap. Maybe if I climbed back in and reversed slowly, I could sneak past him. My pulse thundered as I opened the door again. But before I could move, he shifted. Not toward me, but to the edge of the road, and he sat down, carefully, deliberately, directly in my path. I froze. He looked at me as if, waiting. In that instant, a chill went through me. This was no simple impediment on a lonely road. It felt like a summons. I swallowed hard, realizing I'd already lingered too long to back away now. I closed my eyes, inhaled the pine-scented air, and met his gaze once more. His dark eyes held something ancient, an understanding that no human voice could express. I thought I saw a flicker of recognition, as though he remembered me from decades past or knew my name. My chest tightened, tears pricking the back of my eyes. I took one more step forward, and he didn't move. Instead, he let out a soft exhale, gentle as the wind, and shifted his weight, as if to say, come. I pressed my hand against the cold metal of the door, heart pounding in my throat, and whispered, "Why are you here?" No answer came, just the bear's steady gaze and the soft afternoon light dancing on his fur. I realized then that this encounter was no accident. He was waiting for me, waiting for something I didn't yet understand, but would soon discover in the heart of the forest. When I finally ripped my gaze away from that silent sentinel, a flash of memory struck me. Years ago, I'd watched a mother bear and her cub from a safe distance, my father at my side, pointing out how the cub's eyes mirrored the world in wonder. There had been something in that young cub's stare, an intelligence, a tenderness I'd never forget. And now, looking into this bear's dark, steady eyes, I recognized that same spark of familiarity. I slid back into the driver's seat, hands shaking, and gingerly started the engine. The rumble seemed deafening in the hush of the taiga. I glanced at the bear through my windshield. He lifted his massive head and, for a heartbeat, I thought he'd charge, but instead he moved only a few paces to the left, clearing just enough space for me to ease past. My stomach knotted. Was he giving me room, or testing me? I inched forward, tires crunching over the gravel, and felt my footsteps seize when he sat down squarely in the middle of the road. His enormous frame settled on his haunches like a king on his throne. My heart pounded so loud I swore he must hear it. I shut off the engine again and pressed my back against the seat, as if I could disappear into leather. "This can't last forever," I muttered, voice hoarse. "You're not going to sit here all afternoon." I grabbed my water bottle and a trail snack, an old granola bar, and stepped out, determined to lure him away. I crunched across the gravel, calling softly, "Hey there, big guy." My words sounded absurd under the forest canopy. He rose, slow and deliberate, and began to walk into the pines. Relief surged through me. He's leaving, I thought. He's going home. I followed at a respectful distance, every nerve on edge. After 20 meters, he halted and glanced directly back at me. The look froze me in place, not curiosity, not hunger, but an invitation, almost a command. He took 5 more silent strides and stopped again. Each time, I wondered if I should turn back, climb into the safety of my truck, and forget this madness. But something pulled me forward, an invisible thread from his eyes to my heart. I took another step, breath shallow. More 20 meters, more halt. He lifted a paw and tapped the soft earth once, twice, then stared again. My pulse hammered, and I realized I was following him not out of bravery, but because I felt compelled, as if I were answering an unspoken summons. The forest around us was alive with low humming, the distant rush of a stream, the whisper of needles in the breeze, the rustle of unseen wildlife. At one point, I dared to speak. "Why are you doing this?" My voice wavered. He cocked his head, nostrils flaring, as though sniffing my fear and my wonder. The pattern repeated, 20 meters, stop, look. It was hypnotic, a rhythm older than memory. I thought the path would end. I imagined he would slip into the underbrush and vanish like a dream. But he did not. He sat down again on the road, turned to face me, and simply waited. I paused, chest tight. The sun had dipped lower, shadows stretching across the forest floor. I felt the pull of the cabin behind me, the promise of shelter and solitude. But I was rooted here by the gaze of a bear who was more than an animal in my mind. A false ending whispered through my thoughts, "He's done leading you. Go back to your life." I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling my heart hammering against ribs. I blinked, forced my legs to move. I raised my camera, intending to capture this astonishing behavior, but the moment I raised it, he sat up straighter and the world seemed to hush. I lowered the camera, realizing some things can't be reduced to pixels. He watched me, silent and patient, as if holding the world's breath in his massive chest. And I understood, with a sudden clarity, that he wasn't just guiding me along a forest path, he was guiding me toward something I'd buried long ago. He was waiting for me to follow. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. A shiver ran down my spine. I forced my fingers to tighten around the camera, knowing I wouldn't turn back. I took a step forward, and his eyes glowed with what felt like quiet triumph. He was calling me deeper into the unknown, and I had no choice but to obey. I didn't know why, but I followed him deeper into the taiga. He didn't bolt into the underbrush, he moved slowly, deliberately, as if leading a solemn procession. Each step he took pressed the soft moss beneath his paws, and I stepped where he had stepped, my boots squelching in his wake. We passed places I hadn't seen since childhood, the broken stump where my father taught me to carve my initials, the narrow game trail where deer used to gather at dawn, the fallen birch that marked the edge of a hidden clearing. Every landmark stirred a memory I'd long forgotten. But I couldn't tear my eyes from him. He paused now and then, ears twitching, nostrils quivering, listening to secrets I couldn't hear. Once he rose onto his hind legs, towering above the saplings, and scanned the horizon like a silent sentinel. Sunlight filtered through the needles, painting his fur gold. I felt as though I'd stumbled into an ancient rite, a journey I was meant to undertake. My heart thundered in my chest, half with fear, half with awe. I walked behind him as if he was someone who knew exactly where I needed to go. With every footfall, the forest seemed to lean in, watching. My breath hitched when he stopped again beside a knotted pine, eyes fixed forward. I thought he would simply vanish into the thicket. But he stopped again, and waited. I pressed my hand against the rough bark of a tree, vertigo spinning in my mind. The path ahead was shadowed, unknown. Yet I couldn't turn back. His quiet invitation held me in place, an unspoken promise that whatever lay ahead was meant to be revealed. I swallowed and took another step, following the bear deeper into the secret heart of the wilderness. When we broke through the last thicket, I saw the narrow path for the first time, an old game trail, overgrown so thick that no human had dared step here in decades. The bear padded ahead, pausing only to brush aside low-hanging branches, as if clearing the way for me. My heart pounded with equal parts dread and curiosity. We came to a fallen pine, its massive trunk split by rot. He circled it, ducking under a tangle of roots, and I followed in his silent wake. The path sloped upward toward a sheer rock face stained by age. I'd never known this hidden corner of the forest existed. Then I saw it, a smoldering ring of stones, half buried in pine needles, the charcoal cold and cracked. Ragged strips of fabric hung from nearby branches, faded cloth in mottled greens and browns. I stepped closer, knees trembling, and spotted bone, a small, bleached fragment, lodged against a stump like a grim token. My legs gave out. I sank to one knee, stomach twisting. Memories flashed, the missing hiker they'd searched for 3 years ago, the desperate airlift, the headlines that died down too quickly. My own son had vanished on a similar trail. Cold dread crept along my spine as I realized this was the place of death. 10 paces away, the bear settled onto his haunches, eyes fixed on me with somber patience. His great bulk sunk into the moss, and he exhaled a low, steady breath. It felt like an apology, and an accusation. He hadn't merely blocked my path, he had brought me here to bear witness. I closed my eyes, pressed fingers to my mouth to still the sob I felt rising. This is it, I thought. This is where the story ends. My chest tightened as the wind whispered through the pines. I pictured myself crawling back to the road, burning this terrible memory and forgetting everything I'd seen. But then I noticed, just beyond the fire ring, half hidden in the shadows, a glint of metal. Something small, almost swallowed by the earth. And in that moment, I realized this journey was far from over. I knelt beside the scattered bones, heart hammering, and my fingers brushed against something hard half buried in the moss. An old camera, its leather casing cracked, the screen spider-webbed with fractures. My hands shook so violently I could barely grip it. I pressed the power button, and the device whirred to life, flickering through frames. There they were, a handful of tourists, laughing and setting up camp by a stream. My breath caught when one of them stepped into view, a young man with my son's smile, the same crooked dimple beneath his left eye. My mind spun back to that frantic search 3 years ago, the helicopters, the bloodhounds, and then the silence when they never found him. I swallowed hard, realization crashing through me, this wasn't a random clearing. The bear had known. He had remembered where the boy lay lost. He wasn't guarding bones, he was guarding memory. He had led me here not by accident, but by purpose. I thought the bear must have stumbled upon the remains by chance, and only then sat watch. But he knew. He had been here all this time, preserving this sacred place in his silent vigil. And now I understood why he waited for me. I closed my eyes, and memories crashed through me like a torrent. I remembered the last time my son begged me to join him on a trek through these woods. I'd snapped at him, told him it was reckless, that I knew better, that forest was dangerous. I'd dismissed his passion for the wild as childish fantasy. How could I have been so blind? I looked up at the bear, who had risen and taken a few deliberate steps closer. His immense shoulders rippled beneath coarse fur, and he settled again just a few feet away, head held high. In his dark eyes I saw something impossible, not the raw hunger of a predator, but the weight of grief and the patience of time. He held knowledge I'd never possessed, and sorrow I'd never imagined. My chest clenched so tight I thought I might suffocate. I sank to my knees in the moss and tears spilled down my face. "I'm so sorry," I choked out. If only I'd listened to him, if only I hadn't pushed him away. My voice broke on each word. The bear remained still, his gaze unwavering. He did not retreat. He did not roar. He simply watched me with that quiet gravity. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. I wiped my cheeks with the back of my hand, voice trembling. "I was wrong," I whispered. "I didn't understand. I didn't believe." The old guilt I'd carried for years burned away in that confession, leaving raw regret in its place. As dusk slipped through the canopy, shadows lengthening around us, I thought he might stand and walk off into the undergrowth. I thought this moment of atonement might be enough, that he'd accept my apology and vanish. But he didn't. He stayed, sitting like a sentinel, watching me with inexhaustible patience until the sky beyond the trees turned the color of ash. And still, he waited. When dawn's pale light filtered through the pines, I woke to the rough earth beneath me and the hush of the forest. I'd fallen asleep curled among the scattered bones, exhaustion finally overtaking me. I sat up, muscles stiff, and saw, there was no bear. No shadow beside me. No massive shape slipping into the trees. Only the faint hiss of morning wind and the distant call of a jay. My hand tightened around the camera. I blinked, chest tightening as I lifted it to my face. The screen glowed, and there it was, a single image I had never taken. The jagged outline of a bear against a blood-red sunrise, giant head raised, nostrils flared to scent the world. In front of him stood a lone figure in a worn jacket, broad shoulders, lean frame, so achingly familiar I felt my throat constrict. It could have been my son. My breath caught. I held the camera at arm's length, heart pounding. Had I dreamed it? The forest held its breath with me as I stared at that impossible photograph. The bear's silhouette looked more alive than any ghost could be. And that figure, so small beneath his towering presence, seemed to tremble in the glow of the fading night. I thought it must have been a hallucination brought on by sweat and sorrow. I pressed my fingers to my eyes, shook my head, and lowered the camera. But when I looked again, the photo remained. Every pixel burned the same indelible truth: I had been here. I had seen this. And even now, with the bear vanished without a trace, I could still smell him, the wet musk of fur and earth, lingering on my clothes, in the dawn air. I pressed the camera to my chest, trembling, and whispered into the silent trees, "I know you were here. I know you waited for me." I thought it was just a dream. But the photograph was real. And the scent of the bear remained. When I climbed into the Land Cruiser, the engine turned over on the first try, as if the machine itself knew to carry me home. The road back seemed impossibly short, like I'd slipped through a hidden door in time and emerged only moments after I'd left. My heart was heavy with the silence of the forest's secrets. I told my story to anyone who'd listen, neighbors at the diner, the forest rangers at the station, but their eyes glazed over. They saw only the cracked screen of my camera, the absence of the photograph. "It must be your imagination," they said. "Stress and loneliness play tricks." No one believed me. No one saw what I saw. But I remember every detail. Every breath of pine-scented air. Every echo of those mighty paws on the earth. Every look in his ancient eyes. And every evening, as twilight drapes the trees in shadow, I stand at the edge of the woods and whisper into the dusk, "You knew. You waited for me. You showed me something I can never forget." He was not merely a wild beast. He was part of the life I lost, and somehow, he gave it back. A month later, I found myself retracing those familiar pines at dawn, my breath misting in the cold air. Where the bones and old fire ring lay, someone had erected a small wooden obelisk, rough-hewn planks, the name of my son carved clumsily, and a single gold-painted paw print. My heart slammed in my chest as I pressed my palm to the cool wood. I knelt, pulling the old laptop from my pack. It sprang to life unexpectedly, and there, on the screen, was that impossible image, my son's outline standing beside the bear's towering silhouette against a blood-red sunrise. I printed it on a scrap of paper and laid it at the base of the monument. My hands trembled as I straightened, tears stinging my eyes. I took a step deeper into the clearing, half expecting nothing more than empty air. But then, high on the granite face beyond the obelisk, I saw him. A dark shape rising against the pale sky, colossal and still. For a heartbeat, time froze. Our eyes met across the distance, two souls bound by grief and grace. The bear lifted his head, nostrils flaring, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, as silently as he'd appeared, he turned and slipped behind the rock, vanishing into shadow. I sank to the snowy ground, tears streaming down my face, not from fear, but from the weight of truth settling in my bones. He had come back, one last time, to show me what I needed to see. I don't know who he was. But he knew what he was doing. He knew more than any human ever could. He showed me something that overturned my entire life. And if you're reading this, know that they remember. And they come back.